What's up, everybody? It's Punk Rock Talk, episode 14. My guests today are Defiance. You're listening to Defiance right now. The infamous No Future, No Hope. It's on our Spotify playlist, Rebellion Noise 2022. Follow us on Spotify. Follow the Rebellion Noise 2022 playlist. It gets updated every Monday. So the songs stay fresh. You might discover some artists on there that you haven't heard before. And we always update it with whoever we're going to be interviewing that week on Punk Rock Talk. Defiance has a new record coming out May of this year, the 21st. It's called War on the Streets. You need to see this album cover. I'm going to pull it up right now. It looks like Defiance. That's all I can say. We're also we're going to be playing a new Defiance song at the end of this interview. So you want to make sure to stick around until the very end. The song that we're going to play is called We Must Kill. I've listened to it a handful of times. Really enjoy it. Can't wait to hear the rest of the record. If you've missed an episode of Punk Rock Talk, don't worry. All of the episodes are on the Havoc's YouTube channel. Subscribe to our channel to get updates on whenever we upload new content there. These episodes get uploaded every Thursday, so this episode will be uploaded tomorrow. Speaking of the Havoc, we have a show coming up at the end of this month in Los Angeles, Friday the 29th, at First Street Billiards. I'm going to show you the flyer here. If you live in the Southern California area, this is going to be a badass show. It's also a music video shoot for us. Come early when doors open to ensure that you're on camera. It's our first show in 8 years. Feels nice to be back. Can't wait to finally play some shows. We've been waiting a long time to do this. Are you in a band? Do you need merchandise? Dead and Buried Inc. are your source. You can find them here on Instagram at Dead and Buried Inc. That's INC, not INK. Or also online at their website, deadandburiedinc.com. Again, that's INC, not INK. If you have questions for Defiance, go ahead and submit those by tapping the question mark icon on your screen. Don't put them on the comments section. They get lost there. I don't see them. Again, just tap that question mark icon. You can submit your question there, and we'll get to them at some point during the interview. And make sure that you stick around to the end of the interview. Not just for the new Defiance song, but also when I announce who next week's guest is going to be. Okay. Having said that, it's time to kick things off with these guys. So let me go ahead and get them on here. Again, if you have questions for Defiance, tap that question mark icon, and we'll get to them at some point during the interview. Okay. There we go. The
Hey.
man, the myth, the legend, Mike Defiance. How are you, bro?
Good. How you doing, man?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Thanks for making time to join me today. There's a lot to talk about, especially with Defiance having a new record coming out. I'm sure it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
First thing I wanted to ask you about this record, did the pandemic have a lot to do with this? Were you out of work and had time to sit down and write, or
No,
did that all
not
come together?
So I would say that wasn't the major driving force, although we did find quite a bit of extra time on our hands. Me and Matt, former guitar player, now currently bass player, kind of had a side thing going, and we had a handful of songs that we had written. And then that band kind of dissolved. We were playing with a drummer, and we were like, why don't we pick a handful of these ones that we've written and try to see what translates into Defiance? So we introduced a couple of those at practice, and that just kind of got the ball rolling. And yeah, I mean, there was no shows going on, so we did have time. As you know, that's part of the process is, you start to write new songs, and you start to tap into that creative element, and then 5 shows come up, and you got to pause that creative process to, play these shows that you've got scheduled, and it kind of takes the wind out of your sails in regards to new material. So that show element wasn't there, and we were really able to kind of focus. There was studio time was available. The only hang up, I think, is what the vinyl pressing industry is going through right now, which is like, you get your stuff done and you're like, okay, cool, let's put this out. And then, they tell you it's going to come out in a year. So, yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, the vinyl situation is a major pain in the ass right now.
Yeah.
And Defiance is notorious for releasing vinyl. One of the first records I ever bought that was a gatefold was No Future, No Hope. And it was so cool to me because thumbing through records at the record store is kind of rare to come across a gatefold. And, opening it up and seeing the band's picture right there in the center, and just the first thought that came to my mind when I saw that was, if this band sounds half as cool as they look, this is going to be a great record.
Well, and I think too, growing up on things like Kiss records and stuff, it's like, it's all part of the package, and I think that was lost with CDs. I never was a fan of CDs, maybe to get something for the car or something before everything was streaming, but it was like getting home and opening that thing and having the poster inside and having the like little fold out, gun or whatever it was that came with those Kiss records that was really crazy. I mean, I think that's something that we, not to the popularity of record labels that we've been on, but we've always said it's got to be gatefold,
Yeah,
because it adds a lot of cost. But I think as an overall package, I think it's a better deal,
totally, because those records stand out in a person's collection.
Yeah, those spine's about that fat. So
Right.
You have 5 Defiance records, it's like that big.
Yeah. And then again, too, just the impression that it leaves on someone.
Yeah.
Again, like the first time I came across No Future, No Hope, and with the gatefold and everything, I was like, I have to have this record. And the guy at the record store was really cool. He actually played it for me. He played me the first track just to see, if I would be into it to buy it. And so Fuck Them All comes on, and I was like, talk about an intro.
That could be a trivia question for the end of the show, as if somebody has the actual number of the time we say fuck on that record. I think it's something like 247.
Yeah, it's something crazy. I actually tried to count it one time.
Well, we can have a session. If somebody wants to count it by the end of the show and give us that number, we'll give a prize. Yet to be determined.
Exactly. Yeah, that was actually something I wanted to ask you about that record. You know, like with it being your first full length, you know, the band had released a couple EPs before that, but with it being the first full length, I think it was a lot of people's introduction to the band.
Yeah.
And with that being the first song, as well as like several songs on the record, they have lengthy intros. How did you decide on that one to be the opening track? Did you just be like, this is just going to fuck people up the most, so it's got to be the opener?
You know, I don't think we thought about it. You know, it's like everything. You don't really think about it. We used to open with that song. I mean, now we sometimes close with that song, or we switch it up or whatever. But like that was a kind of like a builder for us. And so we were used to opening up with that for live shows. And we were like, well, why don't we make this like the set? Why don't we put this first? And this is kind of how we open our live shows. And it seems to kind of build like this dark energy and then go into the record, you know? So I think, you know, when you're 23, not as much, you're not as, you know, you don't do things on purpose.
Right.
It just happened that way, you know, so it wasn't too thought out.
Also, with a lot of those songs, like I said before, they have lengthy intros, which is actually something that I think is fucking rad. And I'm curious if you were the primary songwriter for those songs. And like, I know you said that at that age, you don't really have, you know, kind of a lot of intention behind what you were doing. It wasn't purposeful. But as a songwriter, did you just like the feeling of having those long intros because of the energy behind it?
I think that we tried to use that time as a buildup, you know, as a buildup to what the song would be. And then, you know, as we continue to write later, things become formula, you know, like I don't know what as a songwriter, what your formula is, but like if we come up with a riff and we're like, okay, that's great. You know, we know our typical formula. It's like something of an intro, verse, chorus, something, whether it's a lead or whether it's a long drum bit or a bass solo or whether it's a chant chorus or whatever, and then verse, chorus out, right? If we're really tricky, we'll throw a bridge in. You know? but it becomes it becomes kind of a formula to where you're not spending all your time like you know, trying to construct this song. If you have a basic recipe for that song, then you're like, okay, yeah, so we do, okay, I like that riff. That's the chorus. This is the, you know, put it together. Let's do it.
Right.
And then it's easy for us to remember as well, you know, because we've got our formula.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that with each release, full-length release, there's distinct changes, but the band still sounds like Defiance. And I have several questions about that I'd like to talk about. But before we get into that, I'm kind of curious just about your roots and what led up to not just the formation of this band, but what got you involved in the music scene in general? You know, what were you like as a kid? What, you know, led to you picking up the guitar for the first time? Or did you come from a musical family, or what's the beginning of all this?
No musical family. It was always just something that I saw in the corner that I gravitated towards. I have pictures of me as a kid, like I would go somehow, I don't know how I got tools or anything like that. I would go build like, you know, rudimentary guitars and like, you know, do the thing for your parents or whatever, you know, like the little show or whatever. But it's interesting because I ended up going into construction and I ended up going into music, you know, and those, I just kind of feel like those things are just in you, you know?
Yeah.
Like I said, no real major, there wasn't a bunch of musicians in my family. Yeah, it was just something that was always there. And the minute I could get a guitar, I started like messing around and, you know, bought those little books that show you how to do basic chords, and then you learn power chords, and then you're like, you know, playing to the music that you like and you listen to, and trying to kind of emulate that. And it all kind of goes from there. You know, you have the basic premise with punk that's like DIY, that you can 1, 2, 3 chords go, you know, anybody can do it. And so that definitely helped the process, being as the, you know, punk was what I primarily started kind of gravitating towards with music. Yeah.
You mentioned Kiss.
Bit.
You mentioned Kiss earlier, and I'm curious if some of their songs were what you were cutting your teeth on as a guitarist.
I would say not musically, but the whole stage thing and the presence. Obviously, we don't put on a show like Kiss, but like those are the things that interested me. And you know, when they were really huge, I was in like 1st or 2nd grade, so it was more of like kind of mimicking that or something in your room or something like that. I didn't have a guitar at that time yet, but it wasn't till later, till I started to kind of like try to play Clash songs and stuff like that. Pistols. I think the Pistols were a little too difficult for me because there's so many layered guitars.
Yeah.
In that stuff, I couldn't pick which one thing he was playing. But the Clash was pretty easy because they used those basic A, D, and E chords and some real weird G chords that I still don't know how to play. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that, you know, stuff that was easy enough to be able to play and mimic. And then you start to kind of develop patterns or whatever, and you start to kind of write your own stuff. So I think the first band I got into was a band called DTs, and it was like 2 guitar players and a drummer. And, you know, we did a couple cover songs, a couple originals. And then it went into that. I think there was a shared member from that went into another band that I played in. I was like 15 or 16, called Cheap Psychology. And our first show was here in Portland at one of the larger venues. We got to open up for 7 Seconds on the Circle Jerks to like 800 people. And I was like 16 or 17 years old. So that was pretty major, you know.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like your first show and you're just like, oh shit. You know, so yeah. You know, and on from that went, you know, I went into Deprived with Tony, that was in Defiance, and went on to do the riffs. We did that for a few years. Played with bands like Unamused, played with bands like Resist that were kind of in the anarcho kind of scene here in Portland or whatever. And then that was kind of how Defiance kind of came to be, is because those bands kind of all started to break up at the same time, but we were all friends, and we were like, why don't we just do like a super group of all our favorite elements of these groups, you know, like, why don't we have, I'll play guitar, you know, and Tony will sing, and well, why don't we have Alaric from Unamused come sing, and then we'll have 2 singers, like Conflict has 2 singers, that's really cool, let's do that, you know. And then we just kind of plucked our drummer from some other band because we thought he was good. So.
Yeah, I think that when you're forming a band, being strategic is important as far as who you're going to choose. For those reasons that you just mentioned, it's like you're trying to find the guys that have, like, you know, the best vibe out of the local bands or whatever. And like, how can we get those guys together in a room to make a fucking really rad band? Yeah.
And we'd all played shows together, you know, and we're like, well, he's got good energy on stage. Let's for sure try to get him involved, you know, or whatever. And we're all friends, you know. The scene in Portland was pretty small at that time. So all of our bands like frequently played together, and we one or all of our bands would be the ones that played if you know, a Nausea or a band that was kind of touring at that time came through, you know, so Final Conflict used to come through. So, yeah.
Talking about the shift from Deprived to Defiance, listening to Deprived, like a lot of those songs are fast and heavy. And then right away with Defiance, there's a noticeable shift. Not that the fast and heavy songs are gone, but there's this introduction of more of that kind of 77 sound, kind of an oi sound, but still really fucking pissed.
Yeah.
How did that shift occur?
I would just say that a lot of the songs that I was writing was what I was listening to, you know, and that's what I was kind of being inspired by. I was listening to like a lot of oi stuff. I kind of cut my teeth on 77 stuff. The other guys in the band kind of came from, they were like metal guys that went to be punks. I was kind of like, you know, like The Clash and Billy Idol and stuff like that is some of the, I wouldn't say new wave because I wasn't like a new romantic or something, but I drug that in, you know, and the kind of rock and roll element with the Clash and the Pistols or whatever, I think is, you know, that was what was influencing my songwriting. And then with Defiance, it kind of started to be a mix of that. And that was what kind of separated us from other bands at the time, is we would have some mid-tempo songs and then we'd have some fast songs where everybody else was just kind of like, we're just you know, we just play fast songs, you know, or we just play oi songs, you know. And so that started to kind of separate us. So we became conscious of like, well, let's keep true to like what we started doing, you know, let's on this record, let's have a couple fast ones, you know. So
when you started introducing those songs to the band, were they like caught off guard by it, or did they think it was cool? You know, because like you said, a lot of the bands, they kind of, in that area especially, it's like, it's just kind of, you know, part of the deal to be fast, heavy, and hard.
I mean, I would say that like I kind of was primarily more into like 77 UK stuff, into early 82 UK stuff than the other guys. They were kind of like more like into, you know, like Kelly was kind of really into Scandinavian stuff, and, you know, Alaric or Gibby was, and Matt were kind of more like into, you know, there's elements of thrash, but English Dogs, GBH exploited like the kind of faster UK 82 stuff or whatever. So I don't think they were caught off guard because everybody was, you know, we were all listening to the same stuff, you know, like, gosh, check out this Blitz record, or, you know, I just kind of, I think I listened to kind of more of that stuff. That was the path I kind of continued down, like Stiff Little Fingers, that kind of stuff, you know, the stuff that has like some tunefulness to it or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit more melodic sensibility.
Yeah. And it's fun to play, and it was fun to kind of like try to sing that stuff. It seemed a little more interesting than just like shouting every single thing, you know. So
yeah, because it's noticeable that there are distinct melodies in those songs. They're just being shouted really aggressively, but the melody is definitely there.
Yeah.
Which is cool because I think that like that kind of became a staple of what we know now as like the street punk sound, especially from the late 90s and early 2000s. And we have seen kind of some of those bands go to the wayside, you know, by breaking up or whatever, and then kind of reforming. And then there's some younger bands that have popped up now that you can definitely tell that there's influence from that era, but then there's also different influence. So it definitely sounds kind of like a new wave of street punk.
Yeah.
But that early era, the late 90s and the early 2000s, I kind of always refer to that as like the golden age of street punk. Living through that and playing so many shows during that time, what would you say was your favorite memory from that era?
I think, like, you had sent me some questions before, and I was kind of thinking about it, and something kind of jumped out at me is that we used to do Portland's Burning, which is London's Burning by the Clash or whatever, and we did it on our tours, and we changed the name, you know, as you do. Minneapolis is burning or whatever you do, and we just kind of got used to doing that. It was like fun, like, gosh, where are we at again? Who's burning tonight, you know? But we did that so often that, like, you know, one time we just happened to be in London and we kind of looked at each other and we're like, London's burning. And we're like, holy shit, now we're doing it like where it was written. And that's pretty cool because it wasn't like, guys, tonight we got to do London's burning. It was like right when it happened and we were just like, shit, okay, cool, you know. I don't know. Awesome. Yeah. Not my favorite memory probably, but it was something that jumped out when I took a look at the questions, because I always thought that was pretty cool.
Another thing that I wanted to ask about is lyrically, Defiance has talked about a lot of the same topics on every record. Do you get tired of writing about these same subjects, not because you don't enjoy writing them as far as being a musician is concerned, but the fact that we're still having to talk about a lot of these social issues, these political issues? You know, the band's been together for 30 years and the new record is talking about the same shit that, you know, is on the first record. Like, how do you feel about that as far as, you know, where we're at in the world?
I think it's interesting that we can sing about it for that long and not a ton has changed. I mean, some of our lyrics from No Future, No Hope are still as relevant as they are today, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think that says more about society than us running out of things to talk about, you know? I think that's just what we write about because at least me personally, my inspiration for lyrics comes from what I see when I walk outside, you know, and I'm still seeing the things I saw as a 20-year-old, 23-year-old kid, and they still piss me off, you know? So I don't know what else to write about, you know, other than the things that like resonate strongly with me and, you know, are a source of inspiration for lyrics. So.
Do you think that growing up in Portland, that shaped a lot of your philosophies and ideals and how you perceive the injustices of the world, the things that you do write about?
I think have you been to Portland? Have you played Portland?
Yeah, several times.
So anybody who's been here and spent any amount of time here knows that the weather here for about 9 months out of the year is gray, and it's even a little shittier in Seattle than it is here. But I think that definitely kind of weighs on your psyche, and it creates a certain type of negativity a little bit, but there's also a little bit of a darkness, you know, that's in there. And I think that is definitely a big part of our sound, you know, like when the spiky punk thing or whatever was kind of having the big resurgence and everybody had like multicolored hair and mohawks and there was as many colors on your jacket and on your bondage pants as possible. We were wearing all black, you know. So I definitely think that element of kind of like darkness or a dismal thing is definitely our surroundings for sure, you know, cold and gray.
Yeah, that's so much an identity with the band's image and the aesthetics that are on all of the releases. And I remember the first time I saw a Defiance picture that was in color, I didn't know how to react. It was just like bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Not that it looked bad or anything. I just was so used to that color scheme of, you know, dark and gray and black and white.
Or when we had Rise or Fall come out and it was like orange.
Yeah. Yeah, that caught me off guard too.
Wait a minute.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that record
Yeah.
is actually, I think, kind of unique in your collection. Obviously, like you mentioned, the cover is in color. It's like this orange sunset. There's a lineup change on that record. I mean, there's lineup changes with every record, really, but with that one, it seems like a lot of the songs sound still like Defiance, but there's kind of more of this like rock and roll element to it. I know that the 77 vibe has always been there, but it just seems a little more prevalent on that record. What inspired that?
So from the lineup change from Out of the Ashes to Rise or Fall, our bass player Alan, that was on Out of the Ashes, ended up leaving the band, and he wasn't able. I think it was he wasn't able to go to Europe when we were going to Europe or something like that. And I was really good. The riffs were going then, and I was really good friends with Kyle Shakes, and you know, we palled around a lot together or whatever, and we were like, hey, can you get your passport? Do you want to go fill in for bass? Or the riffs doing anything? Or can you come do this? And it just worked out. Like we had fun palling around doing music together. So it was like, okay, cool. And I think I had some, you know, stuff kind of kicking around or whatever. And he's a really good songwriter, you know? And so we played off each other really well. And if I kind of came to him with like a, you know, 3 chords or something, he's like, check this out. And he would like throw something in, and we really vibed off each other really well. And so I think you can definitely hear that in that record. And that's what kind of separates that record from other records, is we just had a thing that bounced off each other really well. But it led to kind of more of a rock and roll sound, and kind of more of a sound that they were doing, you know?
Right. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw him play with you guys, and I was like, yeah, he fits in.
Yeah.
You know, it just seemed like the vibe was definitely there.
Yeah.
Talking about lineup changes, as I said before, there's really been lineup changes on every record. And in some ways, you guys have come full circle with original members being back in the band now. And even some original members that have returned and also left again. You've been the only constant throughout the band. And being in a band myself, I know what it's like going through the ups and downs with lineup changes, or just, you know, shit's just not lining up for whatever reason. Like you hope that it will, and, you know, you kind of get down about it or whatever. What keeps you going through all the ups and downs to continue doing this band?
There's just so much time invested in it, you know? It's like you think about it, and, you know, like me and Matt, we're going to start a side thing or whatever, and it's like we're starting from scratch. Sure, we'll kind of maybe gain a little bit of notoriety off the fact that, like, we were in this band and now we're doing this band, and then we're kind of like, let's just maybe do it anonymously, you know, and just see if people know who it is, or, you know, or if the songs hold their own enough and people like it, and they wouldn't have liked it if it was Defiance, but they like it because it's something different. I think what drives me is just that, yeah, like the amount of time I've put into this band in particular or whatever, and I don't really know what else to do, you know. This is just what we've done, you know. Lineup changes happen because life happens, you know. Like some guy is in a relationship and can't go on tour, and this guy can, and, you know, or you have a dispute. I mean, it's like any friendship you have, you know, like, and these guys are like, you know, the intention is that these guys are like your best friends. This isn't supposed to be a job, you know? So we're back to that, you know what I mean? Yeah, we've had a lot of kind of lineup changes or whatever, and some things worked and some things didn't. And like you said, some things come full circle. And the reasons those same things stopped in the first place are the reasons they may have stopped the second time around with, certain members. So I won't name names or get personal or whatever, but I'll stay that way.
Right on.
Yeah.
I want to take a second to address the audience. If you have questions for Mike, go ahead and tap that question mark icon on your screen, and you'll be able to put your question there. Don't put it in the comment section. It gets lost there. I won't see it. And having said that, there are a couple questions already in the queue. So I'm going to pull some of those up, and let's see what we got from the audience. Okay. This comes from Constant Struggle. What did you think about Dead City Punks when you guys played with them?
I thought that show was awesome. I thought the fire was awesome. And I'm digging like that whole thing that's going on in LA with these kind of like, kind of kamikaze shows that are going on in like, it's super DIY and it's super cool and it's a totally different vibe. And we were super happy to play that show and do something kind of different in LA than we typically do, So I'm hoping to play more shows like that in the future.
This question comes from, oh, wait a minute. I just had a glitch on the screen here. Let's see. J Kamikaze says, what made you guys come back? Same question to you too, Jason. Okay, Mike, I'll let you go first.
So we did a tour of Scandinavia in about 2011, and our drummer, we kind of had a falling out with our drummer, and we left him in Europe, and we came home, and it was just kind of like the scene was kind of doing something weird from like 08 to like 12, 13. It was just like whatever we were doing was like there was nobody at the shows. There was no scene like that going on. And we just kind of took a break. Tony, our former singer, had a club called East End here in Portland or whatever. And somebody was like, why don't you guys do the original lineup with Defiance and play this New Year's show? And we're like, that could be fun. It would be our like 15-year anniversary or whatever it was at the time. I don't remember the math, but we were like, yeah, that actually kind of sounds fun. I think it's our 20-year anniversary actually. And we're like, okay. We played the show, didn't really think too much of it or whatever. And then we just started getting calls, like somebody from Seattle's like, hey, I heard you guys were like doing something. We have this show. We want you to come up here and play. And we're like, well, we're not really touring. We just kind of did a one-off. And then more offers started coming in. And then festivals like, the one in Oklahoma, Fuck You, We Rule Okay or whatever. And just punk rock bowling, things like that. We just started kind of getting invites to stuff. And those invites just made things really easy. It was like, we can still play shows. We can still do some things on our own terms or whatever. And we don't have to get in a van and quit our jobs and, like we used to have to do and go around the United States for 6 weeks and see different Taco Bells and nothing between large cities, So that's what kind of brought us back to it. And the fact that we started having fun like we did in the very, very beginning, because the chemistry clicked with the original guys who hadn't played together for quite a long time. We were like, as long as offers are coming in, we're just going to do it. When the phone stops ringing, maybe we reassess, but that's where we're at.
To answer the question on my end, I was really busy with another project for a long time that featured some of the other members of the Havoc. And kind of towards, I'd say 2018 or so. No, before that, actually. I think it was 2016. I was just starting to get really burnt out on being in Southern California. I'm not originally from there. I had moved there right out of high school, had been there coming up on 18 years, and I just was getting so fucking tired of the cost of living and just all the bullshit. And I was just in a dark period in my life at that time. And so I decided to move back home to Oklahoma, where I'm from originally, to kind of press the reset button. I had gotten married for the second time, and brought my wife with me to Oklahoma. And when I got here, I just was going down memory lane constantly because it's just, you know, my roots. And that made me start thinking about my roots in music and the last time I had been really happy playing music. And that was when the Havoc was active in the early 2000s. And so I just started thinking about, like, what if I were able to take all of the lessons I've learned musically since the Havoc broke up and could apply them to the Havoc now? What would that look like? What would that sound like? So I wrote one song that was actually just about my relationship with Justin, my best friend, who's the guitarist, one of the guitarists in the band. Sent it to him. I was like, I wrote this song for you. It's like Havoc style. And he fucking loved it. And he was like, we should release this. And I was like, that's going to open up this whole other can of worms. Are you sure? And he was like, I think we ought to consider it. So that just kind of started getting the ball rolling. Me and the other guitarists hadn't talked in years. But when he saw that we were going to pursue something, he was interested in participating. So that kind of started rekindling that relationship. And fast forward to now, we've just been having a great time writing new shit and looking forward to finally playing shows again. So that answers that question. Let's see here. This question comes from one order of Mangram. Out of today's touring bands, if you could pick 5 to tour the country with, who would they be?
I don't know. I mean, the last couple of years has been really hit and miss for touring bands too, you know? So there's been a lot of bands that I've seen kind of like, are they still around? Like, you know, you're starting to see kind of shows and tours happen again or whatever. One band we love playing with is the Starving Wolves from Austin. We love Davey. Always friends with the Casualties guys. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know a ton of what bands are still kind of active too, you know? I like the Ravagers from Baltimore.
Yeah, that band kicks ass.
Yeah, that new record's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Rotten UK from Rochester, they're pretty cool.
I had Alex Hagen on here about a month ago or something.
Yeah.
And it was great talking with him about Ravagers and kind of his whole artistic process. He's a really creative guy.
Yeah.
Let's see. Got a lot that have come through. Let's see here. Charge Hammer says, I know you guys are playing Punks Unite in Denver in July. Any side gigs around that gig in any other nearby cities?
So there's nothing kind of in the Denver, Colorado area or whatever. We're just going for that specific show. We do have a record release show here in Portland on May 21st at Dante's. We have 3 Southern California dates. Let's see if I can say those without messing anything up. We've got Alex's in Long Beach on Friday, June 10th. We've got Kenton Club in San Diego on Saturday, June 11th. And then we have an LA show. I think it's a matinee show at First Street Billiards where you're playing. And that's all we have right now scheduled for prior to Punks Unite. I think we are confirmed for Skullfest this year in Pittsburgh. And that's all we kind of have on the books right now. So we were going to try to take that Pittsburgh thing and try to trickle in a couple of East Coast shows, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. I mean, with everybody's schedules kind of right now or whatever, our summer filled up pretty quick. So, yeah, catch us at Punks Unite if you're in that area. It's going to be an awesome show. 2 shows.
That definitely is going to be a badass show.
Yeah.
Okay, next question comes from our friends at Dismantled Records.
Oh, this guy, huh?
This guy. He says, what happened with Kelly Halliburton? In my opinion, the best punk bassist of all time.
So Kelly, like I said, we weren't like 100% functional touring band or whatever, but he's got a lot of irons and a lot of fires. So at the time he was playing with us, he was in, I think, 2 punk bands, an outlaw country band, and he was playing with the folks from Dead Moon in a band called Pierced Arrows. So in addition to us, he was in 4 other bands. So we would be getting these offers and say, hey, we want to go play this fest. And he's like, I'm already booked, So a few of those things kind of happened, and we were like, well, we're not going to miss out on these things. So we're going to get somebody else to fill in. And when we get back to work, we will put you back in, and we'll continue as it is. And we'll try to do as many shows as you can do. But kind of what happened is, we brought our friend Ethan in for a couple of shows. We went down to Mexico and played Punk Fest in Mexico City. That was super cool. And then we had a string of LA shows, and we were like, shit, Ethan can't do it. Let's ask Matt. I was playing on the side with Matt anyway, and I was like, I know he's probably not going to be into playing bass, but he super knows all the songs. So let's see if he's into it. And when that happened, it was like everything kind of clicked. It was like we had a really good time when we traveled. Everything was really lighthearted. There was no drama. Not that Kelly was the source of drama or anything like that, but he was too busy at the time, and we were doing more things than he could do, and it just kind of went that way. So subsequently, right around the same time, several things happened to where his band slimmed back down to 1, but we were already on the trajectory that we were on or whatever. So
that leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you about. We've talked a little bit about the sound kind of shifting on different records, but it always sounds like Defiance. Out of the Ashes doesn't really feature a lot of bass lines, and that caught me off guard the first time I listened to it. Looking back on that record, do you feel like that's a pro or a con?
As the guitar player that plays pretty simply, there's a time and a place for everything. I think some of those fills are very tactful. I think some of them aren't. Our second album Kelly wasn't on our second album either. But on our third album, Alan, I think he tried to pay homage to that. I think he tried to kind of put some of that stuff in without like copying, knowing that it was a part of the sound. For me, I like it solid, I like a nice solid sound or whatever. I don't want the bass playing 10 times the amount of notes that the guitar's playing. I'm like classic, simple, hard hitting. So that's my opinion as a guitar player.
I got sidetracked for a second, and then I was second guessing if I asked that question properly. Did I say Nothing Lasts Forever, or did I say Out of the Ashes?
Ashes.
That was my mistake. I meant Nothing Lasts Forever.
Yeah, same though. I think Chris, our bass player then too, tried to kind of pay a little bit of homage, but had his own style. He was into different shit. He was into Motorhead. He was playing some chords and had a kind of heavy sound of his own, and we just dug it. And that record that record has less. I think we were listening to like a lot of Swedish stuff too. You know, we were listening to a lot of like Anti-Cymex and Driller Killer and stuff at that time. And a lot of those songs are kind of like heavy like that. And his style of bass like really worked for that. So, I mean, I think that album's mostly fast, I think.
Yeah. So, when I first listened to that record, I felt like the songs matched the imagery perfectly.
Yeah.
And I love that photo of you guys in the cemetery on the back cover. It just looked and sounded like death.
It's dark.
Yeah. Fucking love that. Okay, let's see if we got a couple more audience questions. Andrea's Edge X says, are you guys coming back to Germany anytime?
To be determined. I think we're still kind of waiting out some of this global traveling challenges that, you know, we've been facing. And things don't seem to kind of, you know, bands are going, you know, like the Casualties are on like a 6-month tour or whatever right now. I saw their dates and that's what it feels like to me. I know it's probably not, but I'm just like, it looks like a blast, but, you know, we're kind of waiting to get some feedback too. And we're not a touring, worldwide touring, like band like that. You know, that's like what they primarily do. That's not what we primarily do. This is for fun. And, I hope to get back to Germany. And I feel like if we go to Europe, we inevitably have to play a ton of shows and like to play a ton of shows in Germany because it's centrally located. And so, yeah, we'd love to. We were wanting to go into some kind of like less traveled places too, which now look like they're not as possible as they were a little while ago. You know, we wanted to go to Russia. We wanted to go to places like the Ukraine. And, you know, on our first European tour way back when, those are some of our craziest, coolest shows were in Eastern European countries. You know, they were like well-attended, just crazy shows, you know, and trying to get off the map a little bit to places like that was one of our goals next time we go back to Europe. But, you know, we expect to, hopefully we can do something. I mean, we've got the new record out. That should put a little momentum behind stuff too. So.
Okay, this next question comes from my buddy $4 Sean. He says, how much did No Future, No Hope shape your band? He was actually just listening to this record the other day and put it on his stories. And I know you guys shared it. So yeah, did it shape Defiance?
The album?
Yes.
I think, I don't know if it shaped us. I love that it was our first record. You know, I think little known fact about the singles is we were, when we formed as a band, we rehearsed for, I don't know, like 3 weeks. And we went in and recorded those first 2 singles, like, just like, I think in the same session. I think we went back on the second session and added vocals, but we came up with those first 8 to 10 songs like pretty quickly, and then played gigs and made slight changes to those songs or whatever. So the ones that were on the singles that ended up on No Future, No Hope were the kind of more crafted versions of those songs that we kind of ended up shaping a little more, playing live and kind of like putting a little more time and effort into it. Really proud of that record and when it came out and what it kind of stood for when it came out. I don't know if it shaped us. I mean, we still play a ton of those songs live, you know. I still love to play those songs live. We all do. So, yeah. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
That leads me to another question that I had about that record that I had sent to you. I've always wondered this. In the song No Future, No Hope, there's a lyric. It says, you can rock the boat or rock the vote. the choice is up to you, but I won't put faith in those that are fucking me and you. Did that lyric come from the MTV Rock the Boat campaign in the 90s?
Yes.
Rock the Vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a tongue-in-cheek reference to, like, you know, them trying to, like, rock the vote in some smarmy little way, and we just had our tongue-in-cheek stab at it. Yeah, for sure.
Looking back on that era, with the whole MTV era, when No Future, No Hope came out, a lot of, you know, kind of, I would say kind of like introductory punk bands were being played on MTV. Rancid, Green Day, The Offspring, those types of bands. What was your perception of that? Because Defiance has always been more of an underground band, that is very blatantly fuck you. Was that kind of your attitude towards those bands when you saw them on MTV, or what were your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, we played, I think it was in, I don't remember the year, we played with Rancid kind of just before they blew up.
Uh-huh.
And they were really nice dudes, you know, and it just, it to me, I wrote the lyrics to the song Ripoff or whatever. It just felt like mainstream had no purpose co-opting something that was close to our hearts. And, you know, that song drew a line in the sand, you know, definitely. And it definitely told people where we felt. And I don't think I've ever said this in any kind of interview or anything, but it wasn't personal to the people. It was personal to the whole situation, you know? It was like, we don't want, this is ours. We don't want it fucking stolen or bought and sold, you know? So that was kind of how that whole thing went, you know? And then I think the lyrics to that song pretty much plainly say how we felt about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've often wondered if that whole MTV era and those bands were kind of the gateway drug for a lot of kids getting into the punk scene. And those same kids are what made up kind of this explosion that we saw in the early 2000s in the underground punk scene. I don't know for sure, but I just kind of have a hunch that maybe it played a part.
Well, it definitely got it out to more people. It definitely put it in malls, which to me wasn't what it needed. I don't think that that's what it needed. I love that it was underground, you know, and I liked that it was dangerous, you know. I liked walking down the street and somebody throwing a rock at you because you had a giant mohawk or you had spiky hair. It was a statement that you weren't a part of society, you know, and watering it down took something that was dangerous to me and made it palatable, you know, and I wasn't into that at all. We weren't into that, and yeah, I mean, we said it. So, yeah, we let the chips fall where they may.
Sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't about like they're making tons of money now and like we're pissed off because we're not doing that, because like that was not ever what we intended to do or what we started out to do. It was just like, this is ours, don't fucking sell it, you know. This is what's close to us, and this is like what we identify with, and now it's watered down. And you know, you walk around today, everybody has green hair. I still like walk by somebody with green hair and go like, oh, punk, oh yeah, I forgot, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is those fucking Mockingbird movies or whatever, Mockingjay and all that shit. What is that? I can't remember what that franchise is called, but in that movie, it's like everyday people in society have colored hair. Fast forward to present day, I think those movies are probably 10 years old at this point. And that's what it is. It's just like you see all these people with colored hair, and it's just so bizarre to me. We've talked a lot about some of the older records, the history of the band. We need to talk about this new record, there's some questions that I definitely want to ask before we run out of time.
Okay.
One of the things that I want to mention, it's not necessarily a question, but I just think it's important to mention. There is a War on the Streets test pressing for sale. Unless they're sold out at this point, I'm not sure.
Sold out.
They're sold out. But let's talk about the cause of that for a second.
Okay.
It's the Benefit for Ukraine via Voltage Records.
Yep.
I cannot believe the timing of all of this. Everything that's happening in Ukraine with the release of your new record, the title of the new record. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable.
It's uncanny, man.
Yeah. Did all this catch you off guard?
No, because the title of the record for us is for what kind of happened in Portland after the George Floyd riots. Our town was like on fire for months and months on end, you know, so you couldn't help whether you were down in the shit or you were driving across town, you were in it, you know. Our police station was boarded up. Our federal building was boarded up. Statues were like taken down so they weren't destroyed. I mean, our city was like pretty crazy. So one of the songs on the record is called Pressure, and it's just kind of about that vibe of what was going on in our town after that happened, and like the call for justice that was kind of going on. So I don't think the title of the record is based on that, which is kind of things led to other things, and that's just the nature of how it is, you know. The war in Ukraine, I think that's not something new. That was something that happened in 2014, 2015 or whatever, when they didn't want to be occupied by Russia. And I'm not a foremost person to talk about all of the insides and outsides of that or whatever, but I think our label, we originally were going to put the record out on Voltage Records, and just through a series of events, it made more sense to put it out in America because we're an American band, and I think that it would just be easier and cheaper for people in the U.S. to get a U.S. version of it. So we continued to do a really limited version on Voltage Records because Martino's our buddy, and we kind of had prior commitments to that, and we wanted to still do something really cool, and he had a lot of really cool ideas on how to do stuff, and I wanted to keep that because it was really cool. One of the things he wanted to do was, do you mind if I press 5 test pressings, and at a later date we can figure out, you know, where this money goes, but I would love to do a benefit or something. And I told him, I love the idea of that, but I'm kind of negative as a person, and I've never really been able to generate any kind of money for any kind of cause through punk. You know, it's great intention, but it never really has worked out in my experience too much. So war in Ukraine, I was like, hey, let's do this, you know, and he's like, I think that's a great idea. Let's get on it. And, you know, he was kind of like, you know, where should the money go? And I go, I don't really know. I'd love it if it went to the punk community, or I'd love it if it went to a lesser known cause. I don't want to get, not that Greenpeace or something like a large charitable organization is a bad thing. But I just said, I don't want punks thrown into some hat of some nameless, faceless entity. I want it to kind of be, we need to have the details, and they need to be a really clear part of selling of the record, you know? And so I think he did a really good job at doing that. It went to a collective of punks, you know, that put on hardcore shows or whatever in the Ukraine. And then another portion of it went to a smaller charity that kind of focuses on homeless and women and children. So that was cool. That was a really good thing.
Yeah, Martino is definitely a great guy. In my conversations with him, he's always, you know, he's got some different idea of what he wants to do. And he's always just super encouraging. So I think it's really awesome that he's trying to do something to affect positive change with this situation because it's totally fucked up.
Yeah, and it's really close to him.
Right.
You know? So, you know, he in Czech, Brno, where he's from, he sees the influx of refugees coming from that, you know, and it's like a big deal. You know, it's like it's a large, you know, presence in his town, you know. So as it is in all the neighboring countries, I'm assuming, you know.
Right. I know that he has some test pressing still available of, I believe, the virus. So anybody in the audience that wants to support that cause, you can check that out on voltagerecords.eu. There has been discussion about the Havoc doing the same whenever our record is ready. I'm sure that whenever it is ready, there's still going to be this issue going on, unfortunately. But something to keep in mind for the future.
Hey, you know what? There might be a new issue going on.
Really? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, there always is.
Oh, yeah. I thought you had like something that you had just seen or something. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about this record and the recording process. Technology has come a long way since the late 90s, early 2000s, when, you know, you were first starting to do things with Defiance or Deprived or whatever. So I'm curious, what was the recording process like for this record? Did you guys keep everything old school? And
yes, because we don't know any different and we're stupid that way. So I was like, okay, so what kind of tape machine do you have? And he goes, well, I mean, we can do it digital. I'm like, no, I don't know why, but I don't want to. You know? And he's like, okay, well, yeah, we can do analog. You know, nobody does that anymore. So the tape is like $200 a reel. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's fine. We're going to do that. So we did all of our rough tracking, or all of the tracking on tape. And then we took that tape and we did, I think there was like 3 or 4 tracks left over. We did all the guitar stuff, and we basically saved the digital portions of it for vocals, because I don't think there's you know, we have a ton of vocal stuff going on or whatever. There's multiple tracks of vocals, and it lent itself, the digital aspect of it lent itself well for that. So that's kind of the process. I mean, old timey.
There's nothing wrong with that, man.
Yeah.
It's just kind of mind blowing to me, like what we are capable of doing now with recording technology. Yeah. Also, with this record, from what I've heard, it's 8 songs. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's cool, because I feel like it's appropriate for where we're at as a society now. People tend to have shorter attention spans. Yeah. So was that part of the reasoning for having 8 songs, or what led to that?
What led to that is we had about 10, I think we had like 10-ish songs, and we were like, that we want all killer, no filler. We don't want to put 2 songs on it that we don't think make the cut. So, and Mad Punks and English Dogs, Leather Bristle Studs and Acne, some of the Menace 12-inch singles. When you do a record and it's a shorter duration, it's on 45, it spreads the grooves out, it's a heavier sound. So I always wanted to do a 12-inch 45. It's still the same length as like an LP. It's not like a mini album or something like that, because as you mentioned earlier, we can't stop writing 5-minute songs. I don't know why.
It's part of the Defiance sound, man, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love it.
It's in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to address the audience for a second. If you weren't tuned in earlier, we are going to be playing one of the new songs off of War on the Streets at the end of this interview, which we're getting really close to. The song is called We Must Kill. Let's talk about that song specifically for a minute, Mike. What's it about?
So it's just about the nature of like the system that we are part of. The title lends itself to the fact that we may be calling for murder. We're not. It's we must kill this beast of power is what the lyrics are talking about. And it's just about like not giving in, you know, and we must kill this beast of power, you know, that we have been facing for 30 years.
Yeah, that goes back to another question that I had just about your youth. As you were growing up, did you have, you know, friends that were kind of already in the scene that were talking to you about kind of these injustices, or was that a topic at the dinner table with your family, or what were the seeds that were planted for you about all of that has, you know, come into all of this?
I, you know, just come from a working class background, single mother, raised by my mom. I think just getting, you know, I was an only child, so I was like spent a lot of time alone. And when I got into music and when I got into lyrics and stuff, I just like, you know, I just poured all my attention into it. Then fast forward to bands like, you know, that the British bands or whatever, of course, had like a political swing to it, whatever it was, you know, whether they were overtly political or whether their lyrics just reflected what was going on in England in the late 70s or whatever. Then fast forward to bands like Crucifix that were, you know, influenced by them, or fast forward to bands like Conflict, bands that started like grabbing my attention were the bands that were like saying something. It just felt more real to me. I could identify with that. And so when I started writing lyrics, it just started to be kind of like that. You know, we had a rule like in Deprived. It was like, okay, how's this band gonna be or whatever. And we're like, okay, no songs about love, no songs about beer, and no songs about this or that or whatever. And that really narrowed it down to like, keep your focus, you know? So I think that kind of translated into Defiance because it was some of the same people. So.
Very cool. I'm going to do a couple more audience questions and then a couple more quick questions of my own before we close this off. Let's see here. Okay, $4 Sean again says, are there any covers on the new album?
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
It's a surprise.
That works.
And it's not a British band.
It's not a British band. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cover by a very old band from New Orleans, and that should really narrow it down because I don't think there's a lot of punk bands from New Orleans.
Cool. This is an interesting question. Bearlift says, what do you guys think of punk rock now compared to 80s, 90s scene?
It's just punk to me, you know? Like I don't think there was differences. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's cool that you can that you can book shows and go to shows and there's tons of people. That's kind of the main difference for me is that like when we were starting out, it was like bands playing to bands and long drives playing to 5 people. And I don't know. I mean, I like that we can reach people, you know, and there's lots of people doing stuff. I wish there was tons more bands, you know. I wish that people would, you know, I think, you know, we can't keep carrying the torch, us like older punks. I mean, there has to be like new punks. There has to be new ideas. There has to be, you know, an injection of new thought, you know, so.
Okay, last couple questions. What is your favorite Defiance song to play live?
I like No Future, No Hope. I like to play No Future, No Hope because it seems to always like resonate with people, and it's got kind of like one of these longer kind of intros that you talk about, and it always just kind of, it's really easy to place in the set, and it always kind of gets a really positive response, even though it's a very negative song. I like playing the lead in it still to this day. I don't know how many thousands of times I've played that. But,
yeah, that's one thing that's cool about the guitar solos on that record. Like, there's just something about with the anthemic songs and like the rock and roll bends on the guitar solos that it just feels like this surge of epicness every time I listen to it. That's just fucking cool, man. I'm sure playing it live is a lot of fun.
That's a lot of Mick Jones and a lot of Steve Jones.
The Joneses.
The Joneses.
What's your favorite Defiance song to listen to?
I don't know. I don't really listen to it. I mean, I've been listening to the new record because it's new to me and over criticizing it, and then I have to put it away. But yeah, I don't listen to our stuff. I mean, I've played it for so long. Yeah.
I asked that same question to Renee Blanks, and she kind of had a similar answer. Like, as a guitarist, she always, you know, she listens to their shit. She's just thinking about like what she should have done better or or whatever. And I think it's kind of weird to listen to your own music.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like hearing your voice on the phone, like on a message or something. It's kind of like, what the fuck is that?
And I think too, the more you listen to it, the more you think about, like you're saying, the more you're thinking about like, fucking, why did I do that? I should have done this. You know, it's just, but that's part of recording. That's part of putting out music, is like trying to capture that piece of time right there and having it in yourself to let that go and ride on its own and not look too far back, or you'll be in the studio overdoing everything, you know? So capture the moment, keep moving.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on Punk Rock Talk today. I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot of shit that you could be doing. So thanks for coming on here and talking about the new record. Before I let you go, is there anything that you want to promote or anybody that you want to shout out?
I heard next week's guest is going to be fun. So I'm going to do a pre-shout out for them.
Okay.
Old friends of ours or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we've got some, when the new record comes out, which is mid-month next month, like I said, we've got some shows. We've got some Southern California shows. We've got a Portland show. We're going to have all sorts of like crazy new merchandise to go with like bundles that I'm working on right now to kind of make it super cool. So all of it, of course, will be super limited. So don't snooze on it because we only made so much of stuff.
Shout out to David Disorder. He's been printing a lot of cool shit.
He has, yeah. And our buddy in Salt Lake, too, from Sedition Nightmares. Both of those guys have been super helpful with us, kind of coming up with new ideas, you know, and bouncing ideas off. And, you know, it's important, I think. You know, we've got screen printers here in Portland, and we have tons of friends. But it's awesome to, like, work with people in our punk community to, like, do stuff and help them as they help us. And you know, yeah, if one person's coming up with all the ideas, it's not always fresh. It's awesome to kind of involve friends like that also have like a lot of creativity too. So yeah, we'll have a new design from David Disorder too.
I think that's another benefit to kind of where we're at in society now with social media. You know, we're able to connect with people now in ways that we couldn't do before.
Yeah, it's really fun, actually. You know? Yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy. It's like, okay, well, how did we do this before? You know, like, it's really cool. We can do little videos. Like, you don't have to spend a ton of time, and you can, like, reach a bunch of different people, and you can, like, challenge your own kind of creativity and say, oh, these guys are doing this. That sounds really cool. You know, like, let's make this short video clip, or let's do this. Let's stir interest this way or do that, you know, or let's, like, do some crazy videos like Jake did for Charged Records with like the army stuff and the werewolf and like, you know, I was just like, that stuff was just like awesome.
Yeah. As much as I feel like social media is a double-edged sword, I love what it's done in terms of creativity for artists. And like I said, just us being able to connect.
Yeah.
Well, all right, everybody. Before we sign off here, I want to announce next week's guest is going to be the lower class brats, Bones specifically. So make sure that you tune in next week for that. To play us out here, this is We Must Kill off of War on the Streets, out May 21st, 2022. Thanks so much, Mike.
Cheers, man. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
We'll see you next time, brother.
All right. Cheers.
Screaming crowds of the